In this module, we'll unpack how real-world asset projects actually let people in through onboarding, identity checks, and investor qualification. We'll connect KYC and AML rules to concrete workflow choices and compare the main compliance models used by leading RWA protocols, so you can see how it all fits together in practice. Imagine an RWA protocol as a pipeline that moves value from messy real-world activity into clean, tradable on-chain positions. Assets are sourced, documented, and wrapped in legal agreements. Then everything bottlenecks at one crucial point: who's actually allowed to touch the token? Participant onboarding is that valve. KYC, AML, and investor checks decide who can enter, stay in, or be cut off from the flow at subscription, redemption, and secondary trading. Design that gate well, and the whole lifecycle becomes usable, scalable, and compliant. Regulation is the structural physics of RWA. You can be creative, but gravity still wins. 4 main questions set your boundaries. First, are these tokens actually securities? That drives disclosure, investor limits, and who's allowed to hold or trade them. Second, does pooling assets turn you into a fund with all the rules that come with that label? Third, do you or your partners need licenses as brokers, advisors, or virtual asset service providers? And finally, are you effectively running market infrastructure like an exchange or settlement system without meaning to? Once you add cross-border access, your regulatory surface area explodes. Think in regions. In the US, the problem is fragmentation. Multiple federal agencies plus state regulators, each with their own view on whether your token is a security, a commodity, or a money service. Europe is moving towards more unified rules under MiCA and MiFID style regimes. Hubs like Singapore, the UAE, and Switzerland lean on sandboxes and bespoke licenses. So in practice, most RWA teams respond with geofencing and jurisdiction-based access controls to keep risk manageable. Designing an RWA protocol means choosing which stakeholder you optimize for first. Retail users bring volume and network effects, but they trigger the strictest consumer protection rules, so they need ultra-simple, almost invisible onboarding. Accredited investors sit in the middle. You can ask for more documentation, but they still expect a polished software-like experience in exchange for access to better assets. Institutions unlock deep liquidity and credibility, yet require complex KYC, legal review, and high-touch, API-friendly workflows. Think of onboarding as the journey from normal customer to allowed to touch the protocol. First, the user raises their hand. They register, pick a product, and share basic details. Next comes the heavy compliance lift. KYC or KYB checks documents, selfies, liveness, and sanctions lists. Then a suitability filter runs. Are they accredited in the right jurisdiction and a fit for this risk profile? Only after passing all that is their verified identity bound to a specific wallet, which is then whitelisted on chain. In RWA protocols, compliance isn't a one-time KYC event. It runs as a loop around every participant and wallet. You periodically refresh KYC data so risk profiles don't go stale. You monitor transactions to catch suspicious on-chain and off-chain patterns early and escalate when needed. You react when circumstances change, like investors moving jurisdictions or restructuring entities. And you run dynamic screening against constantly updated sanctions and PEP lists. Mature RWA systems automate as much of this loop as possible. Here's how you can embed KYC into an RWA protocol without ever putting personal data on-chain. First, a regulated provider runs checks off-chain. Documents, sanctions lists, investor status. They decide yes or no under their policies. Then, instead of sending the data, they publish a cryptographic eligibility passed attestation to the chain, often as a soul-bound token or a zero-knowledge credential. Finally, every time a user transacts, the smart contract checks that attestation in real time, silently enforcing compliance. Hybrid RWA protocols increasingly use a layered model. At the top, you keep things permissionless. Anyone can discover tokens, simulate positions, or participate in governance without touching regulated assets. That's where network effects and community experimentation happen. Underneath sits the fenced pool where real exposure lives. Access there is tied to verified wallets, KYC, and legal documentation. Finally, legal entities like SPVs or funds connect only to that fenced pool, so institutions see a familiar structure while users still experience a DeFi-style interface. Choosing a compliance pattern really means deciding who you serve, how you onboard them, and what you're willing to trade off. Permission pools work for verified retail and institutions. They rely on whitelists, give you reasonable composability, and offer strong regulatory comfort. Institutional-only structures narrow the audience to banks and funds. Access is heavily curated, composability is low, but regulatory safety is highest. Hybrid models try to get the best of both. Open discovery with a locked permissioned core, trading a bit of certainty for reach and network effects. Every RWA protocol has to decide where it sits between openness and compliance. Dialing toward openness means anyone can participate with minimal checks. You gain global reach, more liquidity, and strong composability. But pseudonymous users collide with real-world identity rules, so regulators may step in. Dialing toward compliance means KYC, whitelists, and tighter controls. Institutions feel safer and enforcement risk drops, but liquidity fragments by jurisdiction and user friction slows retail growth. Most savvy teams adjust that balance over time, opening gradually as laws and market trust mature. A useful design pattern is to treat compliance as a plugin, not as part of the asset itself. Your base smart contracts only manage balances, transfers, and cash flow logic. For every action, they ask a separate policy engine whether it's allowed. That policy engine can encode KYC rules, investor limits, or jurisdictional constraints, and you can swap or upgrade it as laws change or as you enter new markets. This keeps your asset ledger simple, composable, and upgradable, without touching user positions or liquidity. To close, let's translate these ideas into how you actually build. First, be narrow on purpose. Start with a few jurisdictions you understand deeply instead of chasing a global launch, then expand from there. Second, make identity and compliance portable. Design around reusable attestations, so users don't repeat KYC for every pool. Third, keep compliance modular. Your core protocol should keep working when local rules change. And finally, expect regulatory drift. Architect upgrades as a normal, repeatable process, not as a crisis response.